3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Vehicle pushing downrange. Trajectory nominal.
All right, welcome everyone. It is just before midnight, November 16, 2022. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. And once again, we are covering hopefully what will be the successful launch of the Artemis I mission. Fourth time is a charm, and you're seeing a live feed here. We're actually currently in a T-minus 30-minute hold, which we'll get into in just a minute here, but first, I want to introduce you to my buddy, Bill Wepner. How you doing tonight, Bill?
I'm doing well and anxious like yourself. I think the fourth will be the charm.
Hopefully, fourth time is a charm. We've had a 2.5-month delay since August 29, but here we are on a chilly mid-November night, and things are looking good so far, except for a few slight technical issues that seem to have been resolved, but at any rate, you're looking at another launch attempt of the Artemis I launch, the first in a series of missions to return human beings back to the moon. This is actually an unmanned mission, and if we have time, we'll get into the details here of what this mission is about. But we're covering a live feed here, and we'll keep the audio on, and whenever they break in with an update, then we'll go ahead and just kind of stop our coverage here and listen to what they have to say. So this rocket has been through quite a bit in the last couple months. We had a fuel leak or a leak in one of the hydrogen tanks, I think it was, that scrubbed the first mission, and then the second one was scrubbed in September. And then we had a couple of hurricanes come in. One is Nicole was the last week or so. And instead of rolling the rocket back into the VAB, they decided to keep it out on the pad. It was not a catastrophic category 4 or 5 hurricane. This was a category 1. So at any rate, here we are. It is currently 11:53 p.m. Central Time, November the 15th. The launch window was originally scheduled to open at 12:04 a.m. Central Time, November 16, which is in about 10 minutes, but it's been pushed back a little bit. There's been an issue with one of the radar that they've been working on, apparently an Ethernet cable connection that they had to shore up and secure. But at any rate, hopefully you've made a cup of coffee and you're staying up late like we are. And we will just continue to cover this when the launch window does officially open. I believe it will be open for about 2 hours. And hopefully we will see a successful launch tonight. So for those of you who don't know, Bill Wepner is a colleague of mine with the Memphis Astronomical Society. He's also a former NASA flight controller during the Apollo era, 1968 to 1970, Apollo 7 to Apollo 13. So, Bill, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing so far tonight?
Well, the countdown as compared to the prior countdowns, this seemed to be going much more smoothly. That Ethernet issue must have come up since the last time I checked the NASA website. The last time I checked, the crew had gone out and checked the liquid hydrogen connector, and they were returning. So let's hope this is just minor, and we don't incur any other delays. I'm very optimistic, and I'm excited. I was going to take a nap today, and then the adrenaline kicked in, so that's just not possible. So I'm probably almost as excited as the launch controllers at the Cape and also the flight controllers in Houston, because once the Saturn, the Space Launch System clears the launch tower, the objectives and the tasks at the Cape are pretty much over. Houston takes over. So Houston is standing by at this very time, and they're excited, and they're listening to all the communications going on at the Cape. But right now, the Capes are the active. The folks at the Cape are the active.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. So we are clearly in a delay now. The NASA test director, who's basically flying the ship for the launch countdown tonight, has said that we are extending the hold that we were currently in at T-minus 10 minutes and counting. And so that puts us off the 1:04 a.m. Eastern time launch. We're now slipping indefinitely into the hold. And NASA test director Carlos Monge saying that we are currently estimating how much work needs to be done before resuming the polling that is supposed to take place 15 minutes before launch. It then goes to terminal count at T-minus 10 minutes. And we've got an update on the tanking of the upper stage liquid hydrogen tank. Currently 95% filled. We're in topping on that tank. It is the last of 4 tanks in the Space Launch System that needed to be completely fueled up before we launch. Of course, cryogenic tanking, a complex operation that has seen some delays tonight. We had a roughly hour delay after a replenish valve on the core stage liquid hydrogen side required hands-on work by a Red Crew team that went out to the launch pad and tightened down some bolts on the valve and got it fixed before leaving the launch pad, and then launch team verifying that work was complete. Now currently we're awaiting some work with the range. The 45th Space Wing, which oversees the range here, makes sure that the airspace and the ocean out over the flight path is clear, and also has the responsibility to destruct the rocket should it go off track. They have been working on some issues with their equipment and sending a flight termination signal to the rocket. There is testing that must happen with the flight termination system that was delayed by a bad Ethernet switch. Switch has been changed out, and now the range is looking to start testing their connectivity to the rocket in order to preserve that safety function that they are responsible for. So again, we are slipping now indefinitely into the launch window. We're awaiting the launch team to evaluate just how much time is required to complete the work to get this rocket ready to launch. And of course, when we have a new T0 for you, we'll report that out right away. Megan, back to you.
All right, so you heard an update. We are slipping into the launch window, which was originally scheduled to begin in 5 minutes. It's 11:59 p.m. Central Time right now. 12:04 was the original start of the launch window. So we are in a T-minus or a T30 minute hold, and it looks like it's going to slip even further than that. So what are we looking at, Bill?
Well, that window, I think, is about 2 hours in length. So if it's a long slip, we'll start to be concerned. But I've got my coffee here. I'm good for that length of time.
Absolutely. By the way, Danny Wilson, welcome. Glad you could join us tonight and stay up late to watch, hopefully, the launch of this. Anybody else who's joining us tonight, feel free to leave your comments in the comment section, whether you're watching us live on YouTube or on Facebook. And we just hit the midnight mark, so happy November 16th. And good morning. Welcome. Yes, this is an unmanned mission. This is Artemis I. And the first one is basically to test all the systems, the SLS, the Space Launch System, the Orion capsule, and several other systems in lieu of what will be successive missions, ultimately the Artemis III in whatever it's going to be, 2 to 3 years from now. that will be a manned mission to put human beings back on the moon. But yes, this first one is an unmanned mission.
I sent you just a few minutes ago a slide with the flight pattern for Artemis I.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at that. We've got a little time here, it looks like, before we actually launch. So while we have some time, we can actually go into a little bit of a background on the mission, and we can talk about that to give people a little bit more context of what we're looking at and what we're dealing with. So, but again, it's 12:01 a.m. right now. Doesn't look like, well, the 12:04 launch is certainly not going to happen. So we're slipping into the window now while they resolve some of these issues. And again, Bill, we're not looking at a leak. We're looking at what was originally a radar issue, some other technical issues. So
well, I think right now we're talking about the range control people, and that's the Air Force. They own that property, and they're responsible for all those launches from Cape Kennedy. And so you have a range control team, and of course a board officer who's on duty for all those missions. And if there's anything to go wrong and they have to destroy that booster, that's the person in charge. I wouldn't want that job, but so I think it's the Air Force right now who are working the problem.
right. Again, there's several people there live watching this rocket launch. So if for whatever reason, excuse me,
I said yes, a huge team.
Huge team, and then also spectators. So
yes,
if for whatever reason there is a launch abort, they got to make sure they get that right and that nobody is personally in danger. So,
and they're launching over water, and as he said, you got to make sure that range in the water, there's no craft on the water. That area downrange, immediately downrange from the launch pad, it's got to be clear.
Absolutely. All right. So again, we're kind of slipping into the launch window here. We'll continue to cover it live. They will break in whenever they get an update. But while we got some time here, why don't we kind of take a look at a background on Artemis I to give people a little bit of an idea of what this mission is all about, what it entails, and kind of give some context, if you will. So for that, we'll show a quick video here.
In Florida, ready to go, the most powerful rocket ever built. Artemis I, without a crew, will test drive the spaceship that will eventually carry astronauts deeper into space than ever before. The first mission will circle the Earth, then set course for several days to the Moon. Artemis I will fly just 100 kilometers from the surface of the far side of the Moon, a hold-your-breath moment for the mission. Then a much wider orbit for 2 weeks before it slingshots back to Earth 42 days after liftoff. The aim is not just to go to the Moon.
We're going back to the Moon in order to learn to live, to work, to survive. How do you keep humans alive in those hostile conditions?
One of Canada's 4 active astronauts will be among the crew that takes the next Artemis mission in 2024 that will also circle far beyond the Moon.
Canada will be the second country in the world to go into deep space, right? That flight will go out for, again, an extended mission, circling around the Moon, testing out all kinds of systems.
When humans first went to the Moon half a century ago, it was an all-American enterprise. But Canada's robotics, notably the Canadarm, made this country a major player in space. When a new lunar orbiting space station, Gateway, goes up in 2 years, the latest Canadarm3 will maintain the platform. From its laboratories, the Canadian manufacturer will be able to control Canadarm from Brampton, Ontario. Though at a distance of 400,000 kilometers, this Canadarm will also have to think for itself.
We will only communicate with this space station once every few days. And in between, the artificial intelligence-based system will cause the robotic system to conduct its tasks.
In 3 to 4 years, a third mission will put humans on the Moon, this time at the South Pole, where areas have gone without sunlight for billions of years.
This is a new part of the Moon. It's a place that we've never explored.
The Artemis missions are stepping stones to a destination tens of millions of miles away, the planet Mars. And Canadians will be crucial partners exploring our solar system. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
All right, so just kind of a quick background here on what Artemis I is. And Bill, you actually sent me this, which shows the flight path, if you will, for Artemis I. So you can see here, it will orbit the moon similar to Apollo 8, although only unmanned. And it will come, within about 60 miles of the lunar surface. And that's where a lot of this testing will take place.
Well, for Artemis 1, the orbiting is going to be much larger than that. Once they go into orbit the first time around the moon, they'll accelerate and go into what's called a distant retrograde orbit, and they're going to be within 40,000 miles of the lunar surface, and we've never been that far from the lunar surface ever, not on any of the Apollo missions. But this is, of course, to give a complete shakeout to the entire system, most notably the Orion spacecraft, and the splashdown at the end of the Artemis I mission will be around the 11th of December. So it's about 20 days.
Right. The video said 42 days, but December 11 is the date that's posted on NASA's website.
Yes. Yeah. 42, I think. I haven't heard that number before.
Okay. So we're talking a little less than a month. December 11 is splashdown, assuming we have a successful launch tonight. And what are some of the tests? Can you kind of fill people in? Because this is a complete system. It's not only the rocket, but it's also the service module. It's the lunar
module. And basically, it's just the entire system without the crew. And it's just having never flown this before, it's going to be a complete test of the whole system. Most notably, of course, the propulsion systems, the service module, which performs all the mid-course corrections, and there may be a few, there may be just one, it's hard to tell. And then when they get into lunar orbit, that's when the service module has to perform again, and then, of course, to take it out of lunar orbit and bring it back. But the main part that this is so different from any of the Apollo missions that preceded it is this distant retrograde orbit, which is, as I said, close to 40,000 miles from the lunar surface. And I'm sure that is to test the capability of going further from the moon at some future time, once we establish some sort of a colonization, however extensive that would be, on the lunar surface, and decide to use the lunar surface as a stepping stone to Mars.
Right. And then the gateway, the plans are eventually to build that.
The gateway is sort of, well, that's evolving. And the second mission, which is perhaps 2 years from now, let's say 2024, that will be crewed, but that's going to be essentially a figure eight. Just if you're looking at this flight plan right now, just visualize a departure from Earth orbit, a figure eight around the moon and back, free return path. And that will be crewed with the 4 crew members. Now, that is an essential checkout of the interconnection between the system, which was which is going to be confirmed with the Artemis I, and the 4-person crew in Artemis II. And then we get into Gateway, and then the lunar landing, and that would be Artemis III and follow on. And we're probably looking at perhaps 4 years from now. And that's just my estimate.
Right. Based on current timeline.
Yes.
So, again, you're looking at
unlike Apollo, the missions are they're separated. They're about 2 years distance between each one.
Right.
But they're much more ambitious.
Right. So you think of how aggressive the Apollo missions were, to go from essentially starting over in January of '67 after the tragic accident of Apollo 1 to, a little less than 2 years later, Apollo 8. It was just a remarkable a feat.
Absolutely remarkable. And curiously enough, next month, December of this year, will be the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17, which was our last lunar landing mission.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the last time human beings set foot on the lunar surface, including, by the way, the only mission to feature a trained geologist. Jack Schmidt was a trained geologist on that mission. So that was kind of interesting. Taurus Littoral Valley. So it certainly is exciting to take this first step and this next step for those like me who are approaching middle age, but missed out on the Apollo missions of the 1960s and 70s. And again, hopefully, we're
10 minutes and holding. I have an update on a new issue that the launch team was studying, and that's the possible liberation, as they say, of some RTV, room temperature vulcanization, essentially caulk that is around the Orion, between Orion and panels that come off to reveal the solar panels for the Orion and European service module. The problem is essentially this: the caulk has a sensor in it, and it through camera inspections of the rocket, they've been able to determine that it is loose and could potentially come off. This is the same issue that was brought before a mission management team, which evaluates additional risks to the rocket, just a day ago. This happened after Hurricane Nicole passed through and delaminated some of the caulk around the bottom of Orion that connects to those panels. The team has determined that this caulk that encompasses this sensor on Orion is likely to come off after launch. And so the engineering team went and did a full analysis on what that debris trajectory could be once it comes off. And they evaluated that it falls within the same amount of risk that was evaluated by the mission management team a day ago. And so with no additional risk, that constraint has been removed. The engineers going on further to say that the RTV, as was discussed a day ago, is a loose and pliable material that is unlikely to cause a higher risk due to damage. They say it's likely to hit the LVSA, which is the adapter, the cone-shaped adapter that meets Orion and comes down, and the ICPS, and then comes down to the core stage. It is a rigid structure that would be able to withstand the impact of that RTV. So that constraint was just removed after discussion between engineers and the NASA test director, launch director, and mission management chair, Mike Serafin. And so now we continue on. We are slipping into the launch window. Currently 9 minutes into the launch window, which ends at 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. The team is currently evaluating the work they have left to do and how much time it will take them to complete it before they can start polling for go. That would normally happen 15 minutes before launch, and we are not ready to resume that polling at this moment. And so we are going into the window. The question is, how deep are we going into the window? A rough calculation of the work, and this is a rough calculation, just for the benefit of those who are watching and those who are here to watch the launch, is no earlier than 1:45 a.m. That again is a rough estimation. This work has to be evaluated, calculated, and a new T0 given, and currently at this moment we don't have that. Just want to be real clear about that. The issue with the range and their radar asset, that has been fixed. And we are awaiting verification of their testing, which is part of the flight termination system, a critical safety system that allows the 45th Space Wing to send a destruct signal to the rocket should it go in the wrong direction. That test has not happened. And although the rocket is fully tanked, both core stage and upper stage, there's still some work to do to get it completely configured and ready to go. That's the latest. This is Artemis Launch Control.
Okay, so again, you just heard a live update. It is 12:17 a.m. Central Time, and the absolute earliest for a possible launch would be 12:45 a.m. Central Time, 1:45 Eastern, and it likely will slip further than that. Launch window closes at 2:04 a.m. Central, 3:04 Eastern. So looks like the radar issue has been fixed, and we've got an issue with some of the caulking, which is new to me, and also testing the launch abort system. So talk to me, Bill. Where are we here? What are your thoughts on this?
That caulking issue came up yesterday as well and was explained away. So I think that they'll continue those conclusions. I don't think anything will change with regard to caulking. I may be wrong. Because I go back to the case, I can't remember which shuttle it was when we lost a piece of styrofoam and ended up losing the whole system on re-entry. So you just don't know. The other with the range safety folks, I think that's just, procedures. The problem is, of course, we only have a 2-hour window.
Right.
And if they get busy or if there's other issues that have to be resolved before they can finally go through their polling. I'm assuming when he talks about polling, they go around to every station and get a go, no go from each and every individually controller, especially at the Cape. That being my interpretation of what he means by polling. So let's hope that we can get this all done within 2 hours. Right now, 2 hours seems like a long time to us, perhaps. To them, it's not very long at all.
You'd be surprised how fast 2 hours go when you're trying to.
Golly. Yes.
2 hours is 20 minutes, maybe less. When you have all these teams that are trying to coordinate, and then in a situation like this where they're trying to troubleshoot a problem and then also test for
if you have those pictures of the control center, the Apollo versus Orion, and then that one. On the left is the Orion and Artemis launch control at Houston. At the Cape, it's completely different. I don't have any experience with the Cape other than what I've seen in movies. But on the left is the picture, the equivalent control center for all the Apollo missions. That's now been completely restored, and it's on the National Registry of Historic Places. It's not used for any missions, but it is certainly on the list for tourists. And then if you got the pictures of the two directors, I'd like to point that out, because we've come a long way in Apollo when it was just an all-male enterprise, believe me. But things have changed, of course, you would expect over 50 years. And I just want to if you could get the picture.
Yeah, I don't have the one of the directors, unfortunately, but I did want to point out. Go
I
ahead.
thought I sent you one with the two together, but maybe, gosh, sorry, I didn't. If I didn't do that, let me do that. I had one on just on one slide. The interesting thing is that the launch director at the Cape is a lady, and you can look her up. Her name is Charlie Blackwell Thompson, and she's a graduate of Clemson. And the picture that I sent you, Jeremy, is interesting because the lanyard where she carries her badge and all is a lanyard. It's got the name Clemson on it. So she's a Clemson fan, obviously. And she's a launch director. Now, once the Space Launch System clears the tower, as I mentioned, all the control now transfers to Houston. And the flight director there is a lady graduate of University of Texas, and her name is Emily Nelson. You can look those two ladies up. They got wonderful backgrounds, and as I say, we've come a long way.
Yeah, in fact, this mission, the Artemis mission, I believe it's currently staffed with about 30% women. Correct me if I'm wrong, give or take.
Don't know, but that sounds like about right, and it's time.
Right. And to compare that with the Apollo 11, there was one woman in the control room. Forget her name now, but one woman versus 30%. And some of the astronauts that will be going to the moon and future Artemis missions will be women also. So yeah, certainly we've come a long way in terms of representation and diversity. And as you said before, it takes a lot of courage when you're a director to make a go, no go call.
To make that go. And Charlie's had to make that call a couple of times. And I feel I admire her being able to do it, but that's her job. While you have that slide up there, Jeremy, I'll just make another comment. On the left, of course, is the Saturn V launch system for all the Apollo missions. And you'll see it's all in white with USA logo on it. On the left is the Space Launch System for Artemis. And I had to ask, well, why is it brown? And shuttle, the orbiter tank for shuttle was brown. I said, well, why is that? Why isn't it white like Saturn almost was? That's much classier looking lift vehicle. Well, it turns out on shuttle anyway, that brown is insulation, because these propellants, the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, they are at cryogenic temperatures, something on the order of minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. They're very, very cold. That's what that escaping fog you see on the NASA feed. At any rate, so that's insulation. And if you paint that, in the case of shuttle, that was going to add about 600 pounds of paint. So they decided, well, why do that? We just don't need the paint except for looks. So they didn't paint that. And I'm sure the Space Launch System there on the right, showing on the right, is much larger than shuttle. I suspect we're probably talking about a half a ton of white paint if we wanted to make that look dressy, which we really don't need. So why waste propellant getting an additional 1,000 pounds off the ground?
Absolutely. And again, comparing Artemis 1 to Apollo in terms of size, I believe Apollo is slightly taller.
Yes.
Maybe a few hundred feet or so. But the Artemis 1 system is the most powerful rocket that has been launched. So again, assuming we're go for tonight, we will be witnessing history in that this will be the most complex system and the most powerful rocket ever launched. So,
and I suspect that it'll probably get off the pad pretty quickly because of those two solid rocket boosters. There, see all that what looks like smoke or gas escaping. That's due to the extremely low temperatures of those propellants. But
right.
Yeah, we got solid rocket boosters similar to shuttle. In fact, that's the one thing that I think is extremely reliable about this space launch system. We're using technology that was used very effectively on shuttle. And I don't remember how many shuttle flights we had, but many, many.
Yes.
Launch pad in Florida ready to.
So again, we are just awaiting the launch, if you will, of or an update for the launch of Artemis I, and we're currently slipping into the launch window. It officially opened at 12:04 a.m. It's now 12:26, so we're about 20 minutes into the launch window. And now tell me about this caulking issue, Bill. That's kind of new for me. When I think caulk, I think windows. So what's the difference, obviously, with a rocket like this when they have to troubleshoot
I don't know, because I'm not at all familiar with the space launch system, but I think caulking is windows. You see caulking a lot in construction of sidewalks and streets, where you have junctions of one piece of concrete to another. There's caulking, and I always get fascinated. Every now and then I'll just bend down and verify. Yeah, that's caulking. It's soft, and that's there to allow for temperature expansion. And but where it's applied and how, they mentioned that. I think my druthers would be replace it or fix it, because if you start taking chances with caulking and under temperature conditions and so on, it might break away, and you might be asking for difficulties. But beyond that, anything I would say would be conjecture on my part, because I'm not exactly sure where the location of the problem caulking is and what its function is. So I can't, speculate anymore. But we don't want to have anything serious occur due to something as simple as caulking. It sounds simple. With a system like this, nothing is simple.
Right. One little flaw, it could change everything.
If you remember Challenger, and I hate to remind people, it was an O-ring.
That's right. That's all it took. And that was catastrophic. Welcome from the Netherlands. Yeah, hoping for a successful launch. Thanks for joining us tonight. Any possible issues with the Leonid's meteor shower? No, I don't think. Don't think so. Again, for meteor showers, most of them are about the size of a grain of sand, and when they burn up, they produce a flash of light that's, pretty neat to see. But as far as interfering with a launch, I don't think that will be an issue. So we're just waiting for an update here. Now the fueling is nearly complete, correct?
Yes.
And
I think this ground control individual is being extremely thorough. This is the best I've heard.
And again, you're talking all these teams are coordinating, checking with each other, double checking. Tell me what's going on right now at the Cape.
Well, they're all looking at their systems, making sure that everything.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. And a clearer picture is starting to emerge as the launch team now reports out that they only have a few minutes left of work to do before they're ready to pick up polling. And we're also hearing that some of that polling, which kicks off with the mission management team, is also now just about 3.5 minutes away. Now, we are currently still in that hold. But the launch team, NASA's test director, is continuing to move the team forward. We've wrapped up work on the upper stage and the lower stage. You're looking now live inside Firing Room 1, where Launch Director Charlie Blackwell Thompson is overseeing her launch team. We've had a number of delays that have put us off the T0, but we are starting to track to a T0 close to around a quarter till, top of the hour. But we do need to have some polling that takes place. I'm pausing now because I'm listening in to the teams as they communicate. In this launch window, which we're currently 26 minutes into, and it's 2 hours long, it runs until 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. We have what's called 40 cutouts. And in those cutouts, they range from about a second to about a minute. These are times where they can't launch. These cutouts must be accounted for when determining a new T0. The upper stage of the rocket, which was the last to get ready and configured, just recently, the team cycled the liquid hydrogen valves, which is required. And they are currently working on the LO2 valves, liquid oxygen valves in the upper stage. That work is almost done. We are now a minute and a half away from the poll of the mission management team, which is several minutes before T-minus 15 minutes. When that poll starts, we'll get a clearer picture of our T0. NASA's test director has informed the launch team to all switch to a common communication channel. It's called 232. And what this means is that the entire launch team is now on one channel, and all future communication will happen there. Whereas there are many channels. Now they reduce it down to one. Just heard from NASA test director Carlos Monge. I'm sorry, Jeff Spalding. Jeff Spalding's on. They swapped out. There are currently no constraints to launch. Great news. Again, no constraints to launch. And they're getting ready to pick up with a poll to determine readiness for launch.
All right, so that is our update. That sounds like good news to me.
I agree.
So no constraints to launch. So it sounds like we're getting close. Certainly we're as close as we've been, Bill.
Okay, NASA test director Jeff Spalding getting ready to conduct the readiness poll. So we are getting close.
All
We're
right.
going to pull up the audio now so that you can listen in.
Rockets go. All right, copy all. And Launch Director NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
I copy all NTD. At this time, I will proceed with my poll. And attention on 232, this is the launch director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Orion Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS, Orion, and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range weather.
Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch.
Copy, LWO. And mission manager. And mission manager, launch director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager on 232. The mission management team has been polled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis I.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, launch director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis I.
Copy, Launch Director, and thank you. All right, we do have a couple of steps to configure, and then we will be ready to resume the clock. CVSE, NTD. CVSE here. Initiate recording of Orion cameras at this time. In work. NTD.
RSR here.
Perform the booster ignition SNA arm rotation enable.
NDT, RSR, booster ignition SNA arm and rotation enable is complete.
And I copy. Thank you.
Okay, so there you heard the poll from launch
All right,
director.
and all personnel, we are going to resume the clock here momentarily.
Getting ready to get that new T0 time. The poll that you heard was the NASA test director's poll. And
all right, and we have verified no cutouts at this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the clock. GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
okay,
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
we are T-minus 10 minutes away from liftoff of Artemis I. As you can see, the clock is now moving. Let's put that up. T-minus 9 minutes and 47 seconds. The L-minus 15 poll
Type
complete.
show
We went
06, 47, 44 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
Okay.
Oh, 1:47:44, 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time and 44 seconds. We went straight into terminal count. Liftoff now 9 minutes away. So terminal count. Control has been given over to the GLS, the ground launch sequencer, a computer and software that is doing all of the commanding and monitoring of the Space Launch System. We'll hear callouts from the GLS operator, Alex Pandalos. As well as NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding. GLS is pre-tensioning the umbilicals at this very moment. You can see them as they run down the rocket. That's getting them ready to detach. At liftoff, those arms will swing away. We'll let go of the rocket in a clockwise direction. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. The GLS is performing up to 100 commands per second, including configuring ground systems for power transfer to the rocket. GLS is turning on cameras, recording video inside and outside the crew module to collect data for engineers. Purging the aft skirt booster with high flow nitrogen. Clear out any hydrogen gas that may be there. You can see the crew access arm is already retracted. When there is crew during Artemis II, it would happen at T-minus 6 minutes. But out of abundance of caution, they went ahead and retracted the arm well ahead of liftoff. Want to point your attention to the base of the mobile launcher. If something wasn't done to reduce the power from the pressure caused by the rocket's ignition and thunderous sound, it could damage the rocket. So the ignition overpressure and sound suppression system will flood the mobile launcher with water. You'll see that sequence start at T-minus 17 seconds. Now coming up in less than 30 seconds, the ground launch sequencer will start bringing the high energy systems online, starting with core stage pressurization. Firing room 1 is completely silent as they listen for the next call.
GLS is go for core stage tank pressurization.
The core stage tank is now pressurizing to flight levels. The replenish valve to the liquid hydrogen tank now closing. The liquid oxygen tank will come a little later. Now we're arming the Orion Ascent pyros and transfer to internal power. The launch abort system, or LAS jettison motor, is now armed. On this flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the flight termination system, or FTS, which gives the Space Force the ability to destruct the rocket if it goes in the wrong direction. Let's listen in for that.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The flight termination system is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
Good word, we've passed that. The cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in. They are now at the right temperature for launch. Countdown continues. T-minus 4 minutes, 15 seconds. Up next, GLS fires up the KPUs. Those are high-speed turbines which provide pressure to hydraulic pumps that steer the RS-25s. Stands for Core Stage Auxiliary Power Unit Start. Now leads to the thrust vector control test at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That can proceed now, and we will see the engines gimbal at the bottom of the core stage. At T-minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, you will hear the go for purge sequence 4. That's a helium purge of the 4 core stage engines downstream of the propellant valve, getting the air and moisture out.
GLS is go for purge sequence 4.
And in just a few seconds, GLS will close the core stage LOX vent, liquid oxygen. The white vapor cloud caused from the super cold gaseous oxygen condensing the water in the atmosphere will disappear. You see it coming out there now. And there it goes. It's closed. LOX vent closed. Pressure rising in the core stage LOX tank to flight levels. Coming up in 15 seconds, look for that thrust vector control actuator test. Engines will gimbal. And there they go. The 4 core stage RS-25 engines gimbaling around, testing the ability to steer the rocket into space. They will operate at 109% performance. Each RS-25 throwing down 500,000 pounds of thrust. All 4, 2 million pounds. All together with the boosters, 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
GLS scope for upper stage to internal power.
Now the upper stage has gone to internal power. So power is removed from the rocket's upper stage, the ICPS, and it's been switched to battery power. The same milestone is coming up for the core stage at T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
GLS scope for core stage to internal power.
The rocket's core stage, which houses the 3 flight computers, is now on battery power. So there is no more hold time available because there's no more margin on the batteries. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries. The count continues. A note now, shortly after liftoff.
1 minute.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2 seconds.
GLS, go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. Launch team can no longer cycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis I. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Five engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Carry good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis I. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops of Mission Control. Full core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis I. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all four RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters into the flight. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all four RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. 3 minutes and 11 seconds into Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis I, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated.
You've been watching special coverage of NASA's launch of the Artemis
and that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members,
so far everything looks like it went smoothly.
A lot of
we just heard the call for 3-engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange. We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis I. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels, fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis I, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good. Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now at 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines. The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight. Five minutes, 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis I, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire maximum thrust. Coming up on 7 minutes since launch today, now traveling over 12,800 miles per hour, 563 miles downrange. Again, still quiet here in Mission Control, Houston. As we prepare for main engine cutoff, the 4 RS-25 engines are beginning to throttle down. "30 seconds now until core stage main engine cutoff. All 4 engines continue to throttle down. Now 7 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight, traveling over 16,000 miles per hour. Continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control, Houston. We're standing by for core stage main engine cutoff. And we have confirmation of core stage main engine cutoff. Orion is now in Earth's orbit. The flight dynamics officer reports that we have a nominal main engine cutoff. And we just heard the call for core stage separation. That means Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage are now flying free from the core stage of the Space Launch System. The next milestone will be solar array deploy approximately 18 minutes after liftoff. But before Orion stretches its wings, let's check back in with our friends at Kennedy Space Center and hear all about what it was like to hear the rocket roar off the launch pad. Megan and Kayla, I've got to hear all about it.
Just kind of the delay between what you see and what you hear, because of course the sound travels a little bit slower, and it was just amazing. The ground shook. We could hear the thrust pushing that rocket into space. 8.8 million pounds of thrust.
Yes,
it's incredible. It was amazing to see here live in person.
How does it compare? So this is your first launch on the ground. How does it compare to your launch when you're in the capsule soaring towards space?
I mean, equally emotional, I think. We train for everything, and so when we're in that capsule waiting for launch, we're just running our procedures. You could almost, trick us and say that we're in the simulator and it wasn't real, but like in that moment of liftoff, when the thrust builds underneath you, like we saw it today, it's just hard not to be overwhelmed by the emotional experience, the excitement, the joy of that moment. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think we can't say it enough. This team really deserved this moment. They've been working so hard for this moment. When I heard that we got into terminal count, it was, I felt a sense of relief and excitement for them that I think everybody here did. We really wanted them to succeed. We really wanted to see the launch today. And wow, I will never forget this.
Me neither. It was an incredible experience to be here and see that happen.
Yeah. Was there anything that was particularly surprising to you? Again, this is your first launch. What were you expecting?
I think we also had a nighttime launch for our launch. And so I think one thing you underestimate is how much it lights up the night sky.
Yes.
We were able to watch it all the way through that trajectory. We were able to see the boosters separate and everything. So it was just an incredible view. It's amazing how much you get to see of the flight path when it's at night and sliding up the sky.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed this, but we see the moon here, and the trajectory of the rocket looked like it was flying towards me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, that's so poetic. It's so beautiful. I'm so glad we launched today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Congratulations to the team. It's
So
incredible.
we're going to head over to Daryl, who was at the launch team. Daryl, you got to count us down through that, through liftoff. I mean, how was that being in the launch control center with them?
Well, Megan, it was something else. I got to tell you, you're looking live inside the firing room where Charlie Blackwell Thompson is about to address her team after a whole lot of hard work and preparation to get to this moment. Let's stand by and listen to her now.
Comm check. But you can't hear it in the room. Can you guys hear me? No. The room can't. I don't know what he's telling me to do.
He's here.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, there we go. Is he ready for me? Well, for once, I might be speechless. So you guys know I have talked a lot about appreciating the moment that you're in. And we have worked hard as a team. You guys have worked hard as a team for this moment. This is your moment. It is not by chance that you are here today. So I want you to look around at this team and know that you have earned it. You have earned your place in the room. You've earned this moment. You have earned your place in history. You were part of a first. Doesn't come along very often. Once in a career, maybe. But we are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars. What you have done today will inspire generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for your resilience. You know, I said at the pre-test briefing, the harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. So congratulations. So we got a couple of traditions here in launch control. And the first one is when you're in the position for the first time, you get a tie cutting. And so I have my launch director scissors. And I'm going to get my tie cut by a couple of legends that are here. And then anyone who wants their tie cut will be making the rounds in the firing room. You got your console chiefs. If they want to do it, that's fine. If you want me to do it, you might have to wait a little while, but I'll stay all night if I have to. It'll be my pleasure to cut ties. So I'm going to take care of mine, and then I have one other presentation that I want to make this evening.
This is Charlie Blackwell Thompson, Artemis I launch director. She just got her tie cut. That is a tradition here at NASA. We just got to hear her talk to the team, and one thing that really stuck out to me that she said is that they've really earned their place in history. We're coming up on solar array deploy. Let's go on to Leah.
Thanks, Megan. And yes, we're here in Mission Control Houston, still monitoring the Artemis I mission and the first flight of Orion atop the Space Launch System. So far, we saw successful liftoff at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time, all the way through separation from the core stage. We now have Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage flying free. And we just heard that we have initiated solar array deploy. So we are turning our focus to that. The spacecraft was running on battery power, but stretching these wings will allow it to stop relying on those batteries and significantly extend the time it can stay in space. So solar array deploy takes about 12 minutes. We have 4 solar arrays that we need to deploy and latch. These will provide power to the spacecraft on its journey to distant retrograde orbit and all the way back to Earth. Once these are properly configured, again, Orion will no longer need to rely solely on battery power. And we expect this to be done about 30 minutes after liftoff. Right now, we're 19 minutes since liftoff today. Orion is now traveling 17,175 miles per hour. We're continuing to hear good calls here in Mission Control Houston from the flight controllers monitoring the mission. A little bit about these solar arrays as we wait. Again, we heard the call that the deploy has been initiated. We'll hear a little bit more about that once they start to unfold. These 4 solar arrays generate 11 kilowatts of power, which is enough electricity to power 2 3-bedroom houses, and they have a wingspan. To unfold, these 4 solar arrays generate 11 kilowatts of power, which is enough electricity to power 2 3-bedroom houses, and they have a wingspan of 63 feet. Just one of these 6.5 by 6.5 foot panels has 1,250 solar cells. So you're looking at a total of 15,000 solar cells. Now, we just heard the call that all 4 solar arrays have been released. So we initially heard the initiation call. That command had been sent. Now those 4 solar arrays are released. Again, this is about a 12-minute process. These solar arrays will deploy straight, and you're getting a live view right now. This is really exciting. They'll eventually be swept back against the vehicle prior to translunar injection burn to prevent any loads from breaking or damaging the arrays. And on the end of each solar array is a camera that will capture imagery for us throughout the mission, along with a few other cameras placed outside and inside the spacecraft to help us monitor and perform various other inspections. Of course, if you recall the Apollo capsule design, there were no solar arrays. We had fuel cells instead. So this design with arrays gives us the opportunity to stay in orbit longer since we practically have no limit to the energy available for use from the sun. Coming up on 21 minutes since liftoff. Orion is attached to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. You can see those 4 solar arrays unfolding now. And again, Artemis I is a flight test. It's paving the way for a sustainable presence at the moon. Looking forward to the future, Gateway will be our space station in lunar orbit. And we have some similarities and differences in the solar arrays unfolding right now on Orion and those that'll be on Gateway. So like we're seeing now, these are deploying autonomously. The Gateway solar arrays will as well. And while these generate those 11 kilowatts of power, the 2 rollout solar arrays, or ROSAs, on Gateway will generate 60 kilowatts of power. That ROSA design is currently being tested aboard the space station. We have 2 new ones installed and a spacewalk conducted earlier today, preparing for another set. Coming up on 22 minutes since liftoff today, Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage traveling over 16,800 miles per hour. The solar arrays deploying now are part of the European service module. It's comprised of 20,000 parts and components. The service module was developed as part of an agreement between NASA and the European Space Agency, or ESA. This is the first time NASA is using a European-built system as a critical element to power an American spacecraft.
All right, you saw it. The coverage is going to continue. Obviously, if they break in, we'll let them speak. But well, we got a moment here. My heart's racing. This is an extremely proud moment for our country, for NASA, and really for the human race. Another great endeavor. And Bill, I know you got some thoughts too.
Well, I'm just speechless. I wouldn't have missed this for anything, and it was just amazing. I've seen launches before, but I've never felt that I
Artemis
was really a part of
the
it.
spacecraft now traveling at 16,500 miles per hour around the Earth. We are in solar array deploy, and we have confirmation all 4 arrays are deployed.
Yeah, it's both a moment of just tremendous excitement, and then I think also relief.
Coming up in a little less than 30 minutes is the perigee raise maneuver.
Now that view that you see right now on the left, that's the control room for Orion. The photo that I showed you earlier was actually the control room for the International Space Station. The two are adjacent to each other at Houston, separated with a wall. I took a picture of the International Space Station control room because it had better. Orion was being built. It wasn't occupied at the time because this was 3 years ago when I was in Houston for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. Now, of course, it's up and running, and but it's similar to the that for the International Space Station.
So talk about kind of what happens next. Obviously, it's cleared the tower, the cape is out,
and with our launch at 1:41 Eastern time this morning, we are looking for a perigee raise maneuver about 53 minutes into today's flight. Again, we are now 25 minutes and 47 seconds into the flight, and we have a complete deployment of all 4 solar arrays. Orion's journey to the moon continues as planned. Again, looking forward to that perigee raise maneuver. That'll be coming up again at about 53 minutes into the mission, so about 27 minutes from now. During the perigee raise maneuver, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will use its RL-10 engine to lift the lowest point of Orion in Earth's orbit. The current orbit is more of an oval shape than a perfect circle, and this burn will raise that point closest to Earth and make the orbit more circular. This will also include a checkout of Orion's systems and any adjustments to the solar arrays. It'll be a short burn, less than 30 seconds long, but critical to keep us on track. And it also prepares us for the next engine burn to send Orion to the moon. That's the translunar injection burn. That'll come up a little later, which is a longer burn, another firing of the RL-10 engine on the interim cryogenic propulsion stage.
You just got the answer to all your questions.
I was going to say she just answered the question.
Yeah. The only thing she didn't mention was at what time of the mission.
We caught a glimpse there of those solar arrays, and with all 4 solar arrays properly deployed, Orion's journey to the moon continues. And we've got more operational updates coming up shortly, but for now, I'm going to toss it back to Megan and Kayla at Kennedy.
On Apollo, it was about an orbit and a half, and then we did the translunar injection burns. So I'm guessing probably sometime, certainly within the next 2 hours.
Massive and loud and just so cool. All right.
I don't know if you want to
The moon.
stay on all
This
that.
is why we call it the moon board, but the moon, since the dawn of time.
So, again, just trying to sum up the moment here. Artemis I was successfully launched officially 12:48, 12:47, somewhere around there AM Central Time, November 16, 2022. It's currently 1:16 a.m. So the launch window opened at 12:04 a.m. We cut into the launch window a little bit, but essentially 44 minutes after the beginning of the launch window, we had a successful launch. And for me personally, and I know, Bill, you probably echo this sentiment, it's a moment of relief, excitement, pride, and again, just kind of speechless in summing up the moment. It's just another moment of history. And, here we are taking this first step 50 years after we last set foot on the moon. And, when a couple of missions are scrubbed, it's human nature to be a little anxious, and we live in the time of instant gratification, but this stuff takes time. So from August 29 to November 16, happy to say we've seen a successful launch of Artemis I, and we'll see this unfold over the next several weeks until Splashdown on December 11, which incidentally was your moment of pride in the Apollo missions, because that's essentially what you were working on. So there you have it, folks. We've witnessed the successful launch of Artemis I and the first step in our journey back to the moon.
How many people do we have still with us? Is there any way you can tell? Do you get a list of the participants?
There's 25 watching right now. The numbers obviously
Really?
dropped off since the launch. Understandably, it's 1:18 in the morning. People do need to sleep. And it's gonna be a while before I can bed down. I can tell you that. I'm full of excitement, but I'm also relieved, just tremendously relieved that we finally saw this through after a couple of scrubs. And early in the evening, you just never know. But yeah, Joanne is still here. Hey, Joanne, thanks for sticking around, and thanks for joining us. So obviously, it's yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Anybody who's still on and stuck around and witnessed this moment in history, I'm very happy to have you here. And Bill, I wasn't aware of this tie cutting ceremony. Can you talk more about that? I didn't know that was a NASA tradition.
I never heard of it before either. I know they have that at some restaurants. If there was a restaurant, I think, in the neighborhood of the Air Force Academy, and if you wore a tie into the restaurant, somebody cut it off. I'm sure that created problems. No, I didn't. I'd never heard of this tradition before this evening.
Well, that's interesting.
So I'll have to research that a little bit and talk to, I don't know too many people who were at the Cape back then, but I'll squawk some of my friends at Houston and see if they know anything about it. I don't know when it originated or anything about it, but I think it's a great tradition.
Absolutely. And you wanted me to show this. I'll go ahead and add this. So this is your flight director.
Yeah.
Charlie Blackwell.
That was wonderful. I mean, the exposure they gave her this evening was well earned, because she put in countless hours.
Yep.
And I think the lesson there is, we had some scrubs and disappointments, and we had a rollback, and we had 2 hurricanes, but we got it off and it went flawlessly.
Absolutely.
You have to do these things right.
Yeah, and Bill Nelson, the NASA administrator, did mention in a press conference after the first scrub that there was a shuttle mission. I don't know which one it was, but it was scrubbed 20 times. So scrubs are not uncommon. And here we are 3 or 4 scrubs in, and we were able to witness a successful launch on November 16, 2022, officially at 12:48 a.m. Central Time, 44 minutes into the launch window. And again, just a tremendously proud moment, also a moment of relief and elation. And for me personally, to be able to experience it with someone who was on 6 Apollo missions as a flight controller is also a moment of pride. So there is a value to sticking around, taking care of yourself as you get older. And, your age is all relative. It's your energy, and it's your attitude and your enthusiasm for life. So Bill, here we are doing it again.
Yes, and I'm looking at the ticker tape, if you want to call it that, going across. And if you count the letters in Artemis, there are 7. I wonder how many people will be going out tomorrow morning early when the Department of Motor Vehicles opens and getting a special license plate.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. That fits perfectly for a license plate. So, and I think yours is Apollo 8, correct?
Apollo 8, yes.
Yeah, your favorite mission of the Apollo moon landings. So we're underway. Now you worked in Houston, so kind of tell me what's going on over there.
They're busy right now. They're very busy because they're getting ready for the translunar injection burn. The folks at the Cape, they're cutting ties and getting ready to go home and for a well-earned night's sleep. But the folks in Houston, they're up and running, and it's going to be a long night for them because after they do the translunar injection burn, it may be just a few hours after that they might do a mid-course correction. It really depends on how accurate that translunar injection burn is. It's not unusual to have it very, very accurate, but they still might have to get ready for a mid-course correction. Now, whether they do it on the launch team or whether they've practiced the first mid-course correction and for, say, the second team, then they'll have a handover and do the mid-course correction then. But that's all programmed, and they have a flight plan, so they'll know when they want to do a mid-course correction and if at all, and to what extent. Which team does it, it just depends.
Yeah.
But in short, that team in Houston right now is really, really busy.
So they're scrambling.
Yes, because they're doing that circularizing maneuver in low Earth orbit, and then they're getting ready to send them to the moon.
Yep.
And that's all with one team. The launch team does all that.
Yep. It's kind of interesting because the Cape handles the launch, but once the rocket clears the tower, it's literally a handoff to Houston.
Exactly.
So you got to be on alert, both teams. But going into this, there's no guarantees of a successful launch or that the launch couldn't be delayed or scrubbed. So you got to be ready.
You've got to be ready. You're spring loaded and ready to go.
Right. But there's also the possibility, of another scrub, and then you just stand down. So,
and I remember on Apollo, I have no idea what it's like for Artemis, but on Apollo, I was only on one launch team, and you're watching your data, and of course you're counting down. You can watch that. And once the launch occurs, the only thing we saw in our data was the numbers might jump a little bit. And I think we got an announcement here.
Cabin, but we expect to continue receiving photo updates throughout the mission. It takes a team, though, to bring the imagery of Orion down to Earth. So let's meet them.
Lower resolution, more compressed, because we have to fit it into a
a thinner pipe, if you will. Every one of these cameras is in its position where it is and it's configured the way it is for a very specific reason. We're going to be monitoring anything that we can see with the cameras for spacecraft performance. The imagery teams at NASA are composed of dozens and dozens of very highly trained, very specialized people, engineers, technicians, analysts. If we can see it, we're going to try and keep an eye on it. Imagery has been invaluable throughout the history of NASA. We flew cameras on Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all of that stuff that we saw with the astronauts around the moon. It helps us detect the unknown unknowns. It allows us to see things that we didn't anticipate happening before. So when we do fly people on Artemis II, we can have high confidence that everything is working the way it should.
I love getting a look at those teams that we don't normally see, like the red team that Megan and Kayla just got to interview. A really big thanks to them and everyone that made this liftoff. I love getting a look at those teams that we don't normally see, like the red team that Megan and again, we're about 15 minutes away from perigee race maneuver.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, we wanted to take us back into Orion and talk about some of the science that's being enabled by Artemis I today. So inside of Orion are 10 of these. So they're called CubeSats because they're tiny satellites. Essentially, they're the size of the shoebox when they're folded down. But then once they're deployed, they're opened up. They have solar arrays, things like that. That's when it gets a lot bigger. Now, these are called secondary payloads for this mission. Kayla, can you talk to us about what secondary payloads are?
Yeah, it just really means that it's not a primary objective of the mission. We're not relying on the success of these CubeSats for overall mission success. It's kind of a bonus payload, right? A chance to deploy these satellites that have different sensors on them and collect some awesome data to support other research objectives.
Yeah, and I know battery life was a concern for some of them, but all 10 were deployed, and scientists, I'm sure, are eager to see what kind of information that hopefully they'll be able to get. And they're just some of several research projects on this flight that will help gather data about the moon and more.
Artemis I is paving the way for us to explore deeper and deeper into space.
I think Artemis I is significant.
All right, so the coverage continues, and there's a lot of information that's going to come out it's already available, but certainly that's going to come out in the next days and weeks. And now Splashdown, December 11, I think, is the official date. And that was your moment of pride on the Apollo missions as well. So we'll be monitoring that as well. And again, bringing the mission to completion. It's a little different because this one is unmanned, but you want to see this one through. So there's a lot of science that's involved and a lot of experimentation. And we certainly are looking forward to the updates. So translunar injection, do we know approximately when that's going to occur?
I think the best guess I could say was probably an hour from now, give or take. But that's only a guess.
Right. Well, it's 1:29 a.m. and we are now 40 minutes, almost 41 minutes into the launch. Again, officially 12:48 a.m. Central Time, November 16, 2022. We witnessed a successful launch of Artemis I. So we are getting well into the evening, Bill, and I know you've had a cup of coffee, so you're getting your second wind. I'm burning adrenaline right now. So we're about an hour and 40 minutes into our broadcast. So this is going to be ongoing for a while.
And what we don't know is whether NASA, or to what extent NASA will cover the translunar injection burn.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll probably go ahead and wrap up. Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. We appreciate you coming out, and it's probably a good idea to take a nap before you get up for work in a few hours. Glad you could join us, as well as everyone else who stuck around for the entire broadcast.
Well, kudos to you, Jeremy, for this having this idea because the video was great, and it was like being in the launch center with everybody. And I didn't realize we had an audience online as large as we did. So it was a real success, and looking forward to doing it again. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but the next Artemis II is probably going to be 2 years off. So
yeah,
we can look at what needs to be improved. But I think this was an awful lot of fun, and I think it was pretty successful. Again, thanks to you, Jeremy.
Well, I'm just relieved and happy that we had a successful launch. Again, a moment of pride for our country and for NASA and really for the entire human race to take this step. And it was just great to witness this with everybody online and to co-host it with you, Bill. You were there 50 years ago. So we'll just see how this unfolds. But it's a relief to have this first step behind us after a 2.5 month wait. So again, it will continue. And when we have the next significant step in the Artemis program, we'll do another live stream. So, but with that, it's 1:31 a.m. Bill, I think we'll call it a night and try to get some sleep before another day tomorrow. I think you're teaching tomorrow, correct?
Yes, but it's a pretty light day.
Oh, that's good. Excellent. Well,
I'll get by.
Yeah, you'll get by. There you go. This was worth it, right? Worth staying up for.
Hey, this is space biz. Yeah, I'll get by.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, we'll wrap up. Again, thanks a lot, Bill, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy,
for staying online.
Thanks everyone who attended.
Absolutely. Thanks to everyone who attended. Get some rest, and we'll see you guys down the road. Thanks a lot.
Good night. Good morning.
Night. Good morning.